Hello, everyone. This is yet another episode of Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. And in these meetings, we talk with professionals who have fascinating career paths and who are willing to share their life hacks with us. Today, I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Eniko Manek to you. Eniko holds a PhD in chemistry, a master's degree in material science, and a bachelor's degree in environmental science. And she also has education in executive management, thermal analysis, quality assurance, and life cycle assessment. Currently, she is the founder of Teuton Tech, the world's first nanoformulation consulting company. Eniko also acts as head of research at the pharmaceutical startup, as well as a scientific advisor at different nanotechnology, biotechnology, IP law, and innovation management firms. Currently, Eniko is affiliated with the College of Medicine and Health Sciences, Khalifa University in the United Arab Emirates, while previously she collaborated with the Florida International University in the US. Great to have you, Eniko. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very glad to see you and curious how it all looks from behind the scenes, as I know that such seemingly perfect, seamless LinkedIn profiles sometimes hide very interesting stories behind. And I would like to hear more about your career decisions and how your career path looked from behind the scenes and from your own perspective.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. So yeah, you're really right. It wasn't that seamless, and it had a lot of twists and turns, plot twist, I would say. So I almost became a zoologist. It was because I really liked to read the book of a particular person. He's called Gerald Darrell, about animals. When I was a teenager, I grew up on his books basically, and I really love animals. So it was like, yeah, I want to become a zoologist. But obviously, my teachers and parents talked me into this idea, and they told me that at least you should become a biologist. So I applied to university. I got accepted, and I didn't like it. So after half a semester, basically I got sick. So it was lucky actually at that point, because I had to skip one semester. And during that semester, instead of immediately going back, I decided that I take my time, I think of what I really would like to do, because I wasn't comfortable with that training. I knew I didn't really have a future there. So I was thinking, I studied German, I started to get into yoga, and I was lucky enough that the next year, this new bachelor master system came out. So I saw it as an opportunity to, acquire new and very, very different skills. So I was thinking that I would take a very broad spectrum bachelor training. So that was environmental science. I mean, I was sure I wanted to stay in science, but based on my previous experience at the university, I wasn't really sure what subjects I liked the most. Um, so I went for the training, and I had a lot of various types of subjects, from chemistry, physics, math, geology, even zoology, actually, eventually biology. And it kind of crystallized that I liked inorganic chemistry, and I really liked physics, which was really surprising for me, because I really did not like physics in secondary school. Our teacher was not the most enthusiastic one. But yeah, it turned out that I liked physics. I was good at physics. So, and when I finished with my bachelor, again, I was thinking that now I have an idea that, what kind of areas I like in natural sciences. And I wanted to combine physics and chemistry. So I did not want to become just a chemist, because I felt it was somewhat restricting. So again, I wanted to keep my options open. And so I decided to become a material scientist. I was totally new at that time. We were the very first grade who started, so it was only another guy and me at the training. So it was really challenging, because no one really knew what we were about to do. So also the teachers were kind of lost in some things. I know there was not like a definite structure for the training. So it was really challenging. And it was also challenging because, it was just the two of us. So we did not really get our own teachers or our own courses. It was rather that, for instance, I had to take the course together with physics PhDs, which was like shocking, obviously, in some cases, because I was lacking a lot of knowledge for that. But yeah, I pushed through, I would say. And I also made use of the opportunity that I could compile a lot of subjects myself. So we had some free credits. And at the time, I read things about nanotechnology. And I thought it's really great. It's cool. I thought it has a great future. So I was relatively new at the time. And I decided to become a nanotechnologist. I was not training for that at the time, in Hungary at least. So I decided that, okay, what I can do is to compile the subjects. So I pick up as much as I can to become a nanotechnologist. So for instance, I took microtechnology, nanotechnology, all kinds of solid state physics and analytical methods, carbon nanotubes, whatever was available at the time. And I also read a lot myself. And when I finished, and also I did my thesis work. So that was my very first scientific paper that came out on my thesis work. That was already the production of ceramic nanoparticles. So I was lucky in that sense that I could go for a topic like that as my first real research topic, I would say. And when I finished, I got offers from the chemistry and the physics department to stay as a PhD student. However, I decided to instead go for another university to do my PhD studies. It was again a bit difficult because universities generally prefer their own students. I mean, to enroll them in their own PhD programs because they already know them, they already have a professor, etc. I did not. So I literally just walked in the door at the other university to a professor, and I told him, like, I would like to do my PhD here. And he told me, like, that's very unusual because, I can honestly tell you that we prefer our own students. So I don't know how it would go. Of course, we can look at your points, but, we have a different system that favors our own students. So, but he supported me. And I was like, I don't care, let's try. And eventually I got in. And I could start to work on a topic that was mainly drug delivery systems. However, because we had some grants, I could incorporate some studies on composite systems with nanoparticles. And I also had a lot of chance to travel. So I worked in France, in Japan, in Russia. These were all really great experiences for me. And I also started to learn Japanese as a hobby. But I knew I don't want to stay at university. And I was very honest about this with my supervisor from the very first time, because she was looking for someone who can take over the group with time. She was about to retire. But I told her that that's not me. I like to work here, but I always wanted to go to industry. That was the reason why I did my PhD, basically. And when I was at the end of my PhD studies, I got an offer from industry. So they were looking for a nanotechnologist. So I was lucky in that sense that actually I got an offer, but partially the offer was an offer because there were not so many nanotechnologists in the country. So they knew that I was working in this kind of topics. And also it required a lot of courage because immediately they gave me a lab, which sounds awesome. But when you just finish with your PhD, you have no idea. So it's a lot of responsibility. And I also joined for a project that had nothing at that time. So basically they told me at the interview that we want to build out a nanotechnology department. The technology itself, we have nothing. We have no equipment, no technology ideas, no personnel for that. So I had to do everything. I got a lab that was basically cluttered with rubbish. We had to clean this out, buy everything, set up everything. So I had to think about everything, but I really, really liked it. It was a great challenge. And I said yes. I knew, I mean, like they told me, like, we have no idea. Would you like to do this? Oh, yeah, sure. And from that point, everything went really fast. So my team was growing. I had my lab, I built out the nanotech department, And I also started to get these more executive level positions at various companies, both in Hungary and in the US. So I was participating in companies as a board member, deputy CEO, director of formulation in the US. So I had a lot on my plate. But I also knew that basically the reason why I was willing to take on this many things was that I knew that eventually I wanted to have my own company. So it was a lot of work and it was really exhausting. So I'm not saying it's easy to do. I had really miserable days, honestly, but I had this end goal and it kept me going eventually. And because I had my end goal, I made very conscious decisions. So I was very conscious about networking, building my own network. So whenever I went to a conference, and I traveled a lot or visited companies, and I had the luck to visit really, really big chemistry and pharma companies, or even have a project with NASA, I made sure I built really good connections with those people, and honestly even kept track of them. So I had this Excel sheet of people, where do they work, what's their email address, their name, where did we meet, what kind of projects they work on, as a resource later. Because I was thinking that, yeah, it would help me a lot with launching my own company. So I was doing this for 3 years, and at the end of these 3 years, I was offered to become the CEO of one of these companies. It was a chemistry innovation company, and I told no, I did not want to be the CEO. And actually, it was rather a wake-up call. So, it gave me the momentum. I was like, oh, I'm done. I left all of these positions and I launched my own company. And this is where my own journey started. My company was launched in August 2018, and it's still up, and it started to go well. Actually, at this point, I can't complain. I have exciting projects, so I'm more in the flow now. It's working. Almost, I wouldn't say by itself, obviously, but it's like, I think it's over that initial painful stage of setting up a company, and I'm very happy with what I have.
Fantastic. Such a great story. Thank you so much for sharing. And since I'm interested in business development, let me start asking questions from the very end, because I'm actually curious. As you might know, like almost every company goes through this period of dip. Seth Godin actually described it well in his book, The Dip, and it's the period of time in which you already invested a lot of resources, time, money, effort into building a business, but you don't have enough traction yet to be afloat. And the whole art is how to recognize when you should, where you should put the stop loss, and when to decide that you should actually get out and start a new venture, or perhaps you should continue and get through this deep, and it will all go uphill from that point. So my question for you would be, how did you recognize, and when was this point when you like you were at the lowest point, but you still what made you think that you would go through the deep and that you would eventually become successful? And especially given that a year ago we had the breakout of Corona, have you also had doubts related to that? Because that's not the very best time for starting businesses as well. But in principle, what made you believe that you should continue rather than just moving on to the next project?
Well, that's an interesting question. Well, if I address your questions one by one, I would say that there is no such a thing as one dip. So it's always ups and downs. At least it was for me, and I think it's the case for most people who launch companies. So I had ups and downs every day. Some day was good, the other day was terrible. I had no confidence. So I think that instead of actually thinking about going through one continuum, like one difficult stage, it's like you have to go through days or get through days when you feel low, like really, really low. And again, I'm obviously, I cannot give you a formula when you should stop and when you should keep going, it depends a lot on the type of your business. So for instance, I was pretty sure I didn't want to start with a product or anything that requires a lot of capital. So I went for, I mean, anyway, I wanted to have a consulting business, but now I'm in the process of launching other businesses, but now I have a basis for that. So basically, I think that anyone, even except if you really have the capital and you really have a team, but if you're on your own and you think about launching a product, do it as small as you can, or rather try to take on other projects. For instance, if you're good at, let's say, cosmetics development, you run a cosmetic company, then maybe you should try to find project where you can participate as a consultant, and then, gain some traction from there, maybe get to know some more people, get some capital, and then you can think about launching your own product. So basically my business model was extremely safe. It wasn't really a business model, it's in that sense, actually. So the only risk factor was myself, my living, because aside my time and mental capacities, I did not have to put anything in the business. So basically, the only thing I had to take care of was obviously some administrative cost relating to, maintaining a business. But aside that, it was only me. So it was basically, I had to make sure I maintain myself without relying on anyone. And for that, what I did was, obviously, when I was employed, I consciously accumulated some savings so I could take this leap.
Right.
And on the other hand, of course, there is all these anecdotes when some very successful business person launched their business and they were living on, I don't know, bread and water for years, this kind of things. But I think it's exaggerated. But on the other hand, you can cut back your expenses, obviously. So, when you're not sure, you don't want to quit, you can kind of still maintain yourself in a consulting business, basically. And then I think that later, now I'm in the process of actually launching actual real products. So this is how I survived. I cannot answer the question like, why did not I give up? I have no idea why I did not give up. I think that maybe on one hand, it was the support from others. No one ever questioned what I was doing. Instead, I was always encouraged. And and it was always, there was always some small things going on. So instead of having this very extreme way of thinking, saying that, oh, I'm either failing or I do everything the way I want and my business is super successful and I make a lot of money, there's like a lot of stages in between. And I think that if you really want to, you can always find something. For instance, I was lucky enough to start my business by having a roughly half-year consulting contract, but it wasn't really a great revenue. But I knew that when it's out, that's out. So from that point, I'm really on my own. But I wasn't really rigid with my approach. For instance, I took on a patent writing project or translating project. So there's so many things you can think about. It's rather like you shouldn't really confine yourself. You have to have an idea where I do want to go, but I think it's a really bad idea to set the road, like really in advance. It's like, I know that in a few years, I would like to be here. I would like to have this type of business, but it doesn't mean that during those years, I'm just going to work on super exciting nanotech development projects. It might be that I'm going to do translation or basically anything, but I considered every project as an opportunity because especially in consulting, like connections is everything basically. And also I would suggest that you don't think that talking to people is a waste of time. I'm saying this because I was really that type of person. Like at the beginning of my PhD, I was really that type of person. I thought it's like people talk too much. It doesn't make sense, to listen to them. But of course, gradually I learned that connections are really valuable. And I'm still surprised how valuable they are because now I rather get my projects by referral. So I know someone who knows someone who's looking for someone like me. And this is how I acquire most of my projects.
Perfect. Actually, referring to what you've said before, I feel for you. I also have these days when I feel like I'm wasting my life, and I have these days of greatness when I feel like, yeah, it's going cool, and I made the best choice I could ever make, and I sometimes I feel like gods were playing a game with me, and every time I'm at the lowest low, something little happens, and every time I think of quitting, something little happens that keeps me going. Like just one more book sells, one more person writes to me with very kind words about what I'm doing, and like something little happens that I'm like, come on, stop complaining, just keep on going, and every single time I have that like I have that crisis that something happens that puts me out from this shit hole and puts me back on the right track. So yeah, I totally feel for you. I also have those like ups and downs, but yeah, I think it's quite common indeed. It's like you have to live day by day. And referring to what you've said about the using heuristics, I fully agree. I think that, like, from what I see, talking to people who navigate themselves very well in the job market, this is quite a common approach. So instead of setting a very specific goal, let's say I will become a CEO of Samsung in 10 years, like that very, very specific, precise goal, and they tend to think more about what type of topic they would like to work on, what type of problem they would like to solve, or what type of lifestyle they would like to live, and like slowly navigate towards that goal, but without any like, but the goal is not as precise, and the road is also not defined step by step, and that's very common. Although I have to say that it's not always possible. So there are also types of careers where, well, you have to go through certain steps, like in sports. Let's say in sports, you have to like to get to certain point. You have to make certain accomplishments, and it's like a very well defined career path where you have those tires and you have championships at different levels, and you have to go through a very particular career track and with very particular like milestones, and you have to go like one at a time. You have to go through a series of milestones, but in vast majority of professions and careers it's not necessary, and I totally agree with you that this self-navigation based on heuristics is much more efficient. And I think that's also one problem with academic lifestyle, that we have very well-defined goal of becoming a professor and a tenure researcher, and the vast majority of PhDs starts their PhD program thinking of, even not consciously but subconsciously, thinking that one day they would be a professor, and I think that makes it very toxic. And that's also why I like what you've said, that when you were embarking on the PhD program, you already had a plan to go forward towards industry, so you never treated a PhD program as a gate to an academic career, but you already had a plan to what to do next. And from what I understood, you always had this thinking that you were planning a few steps ahead. So after you entered industry, you also already thought about becoming independent. So you always thought about your future like a few steps ahead. So I really like that. And actually, can I ask you this question? Like, do you feel that in the last 3 years, ever since you have your own business, did you change as a person? Like, did
Yes.
it make you change, like, personality wise? Are there things that you are now capable of doing that you would never think you would ever do before you start a business?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And it's different. Even before, when I went through all these positions in industry, I was always kind of doubtful, like, am I really suited for that to make it happen? And I'm, yeah, suitable for those really high level positions. But I have to say that in my own business, it's on another level. So it's more like a game of confidence, I think, because there's a lot of things I have to solve. And rely on myself for most things, especially even when it comes to administrative things, or yeah, even like just, you know, the operational part, like running the business. um, I really, you know, I had to learn a lot. I had to learn a lot about even law, legislation, accounting, everything like that, you know, taxation. And I still, of course, I have to push my boundaries all the time, because, you know, I'm still like not a big business. I have other consultants, but they are scientific consultants too. So they participate in a project from a scientific point of view. They're not going to do my website, for instance. So yes, and you know, I still have those days when I'm like, oh, it's impossible. I just cannot do this. A lot of people can design a website, but I can't. But then I sit down and say, it's not that bad actually. And it's continuous. So I think I'm still at the very beginning of the road. Obviously, I did a lot, but like I changed a lot too. And I think that these few years, the last few years, even though they were the hardest in some sense, were the best years so far for me, on one sense, because I really like my freedom. And on the other hand, because I think that these were really the time when I matured, which sounds weird after having all those positions at this age, but it's really when I became more like I wouldn't say adult, but it's more like a mature person who knows herself and her capabilities, basically.
Right. And I think when you enter a business as like actively as a business developer, you have to learn that your actions have like real consequences, and that that's something that you don't learn as a PhD student, because eventually what you produce is some theoretical work that gets published, but it's not that you have quantitative feedback from the rest of the universe, which you have as a as a business owner. So if you produce something that you believe has value for others, but you they don't want to pay for your service, that means something, right? And it hits you hard very quickly. So it's a very fast verification of whether or not you are a good value producer or not. And this is something that in the academic system sometimes you will never know. And some academics go through their whole careers producing publications that they will never know if these publications will lead to any real improvements in the society that anyone would ever pay for. So in a long perspective. So I think this is like it really keeps you down to earth. And I had to also become much more practical ever since I started a business. And now I before I ever decide to do something, any activity, I always feel I always think about what is the purpose of this. Is it
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, is it so does it help me to grow my company? Does it help me to build my personal life? Does it help me to like relax? Because if it's none of these three, then it's a junk. It's not a well spent time. So I should eliminate it. And I started eliminating projects and tasks much more in a much more shrewd way than before. So that's true. And I also agree that you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone much more than as an employee. And that's also something I couldn't predict when I was starting. I wouldn't even guess that I would ever have a YouTube channel, or if I that I would ever even write a book, although I like writing. But I didn't think that I would ever like have guts to put my work out there for people to buy. Maybe I would have enough guts to put it out there for free as a free ebook or something, but not as a product. And now, well, I have a business. I have to take care of the books, and the product must be there. So I have to put a price tag on what I do. And I have to care about the reviews. I have to care about the quality and the reception. But it's fine. I already got used to it. And I got to like this game. So. This is something that I barely recognize myself from 2 years ago when I was first. Actually, 2 years ago, I didn't even formally have a company. I started in July of 2019, but I see what you mean. Okay, so and actually, I have to say that I also very much like your strategy to use an Excel sheet and list all your contacts with
Oh,
all
yeah.
the potential topics that they might help you with. This is clever. I don't do this myself. But that's also what I do. Like when I have a problem, I always think of, okay, what are the top 5 people who might help me with this. But I think it's really clever what you do, because then you don't really have to spend time on thinking. You just look into your Excel sheet, and it saves a lot of time probably. So I think it's really wise of you, and maybe I should do it as well. Like I might consider doing this, because it's so efficient then, and you will not forget anyone because just because they didn't come up to your mind when they should have. So that's clever. That I have to say.
Yeah, I also extended this approach. So it's weird. I wouldn't say I like Excel sheets, but then I just realized I have a lot of Excel sheets of a lot of things. So I also, obviously, before launch my company, I did a lot of market research in this in particular area. Um, so there's no other non-formulation consulting companies, but there is other companies who offer some services related to nanoformulation.
Mhm.
So obviously I went through all those companies, looked at them, figured like what stage they could be at. I think that most of them are this fundraising, some are already working, but that was also a thing that was very educational, but retrospectively. That now I realized that all of these companies, so nanoformulation, especially nanoformulation of drugs, is really new topic. So research papers came out in the last 10 years, but on an industrial scale, they started to do this in the last few years. And a lot of those companies actually just offer one technique. So they had an idea for one specific nanoformulation technique or one specific carrier. Let's say they work with cyclodextrins or they work with liposomes, but then they want to build everything around that. So they kind of provide like a given technology, no matter what your compound is. And I think that, yeah, it's good because they have some projects, but only for certain compounds.
Mhm.
And I was thinking that it was very educational to figure that, yeah, what if I actually offer that I help you to develop your own particles, but they will be all tailor-made. And I'm not saying that, oh, you have to use this technology otherwise. No, I give options to my clients, and I think they like it actually. So, whatever company you want to launch, obviously you have to look around. I'm not really fond of these formal business plans. I know it's very, it's fashionable nowadays to say that, oh, you have to have your business plan and do your research. I think you have to do the research for yourself, like basically pick like segments of a business plan that you could use yourself. Again, not waste your time on other things because you're not going to present it to investors at the very beginning. Obviously, it's more like for yourself. And referring back to this networking and keeping track of connections, I was also very conscious to build out my LinkedIn network. So that's also really helpful because a lot of people find me on LinkedIn nowadays, actually. And I even had the habit for a while of taking notes of those people who checked me out on LinkedIn, what company they worked at, what was their area, their profession, to see my, to kind of have an idea of my exposure, like who might be interested in my services. But I would definitely recommend basically to anyone. I'm not really a social media person, so I don't really post, but I think that building connections is really, really valuable even on LinkedIn. And when you're a PhD student, you can start it. And yes, maybe a CEO won't accept your connection request, but you're going to have more and more connections. And then, after a while, there is this point when actually people are connecting to you. So you don't actively connect to anyone anymore, but rather people find you. So it's a game that you have to play for several games if you have a goal at the end, like you started at the very beginning of your PhD studies, literally you can do searches. You can search for industry and try to connect to people who are not so much higher up on the career ladder than you are, but like somewhere a bit more up than you are, like mid managers, for instance. So I think it's a good tactic to gain some, exposure, probably.
Right. Well, it's also that LinkedIn is good for businesses. It's when your content is posted, when you post something, then your contacts basically have a chance to see it. Whereas on some other media, like on Twitter, it immediately disappears. So, like that's also a mistake I made. I think if I spend so much time on LinkedIn as I spent on Twitter in the last 2 years, I would be much more like much better off in terms of my
Mhm.
network. So I think, yeah, now LinkedIn takes over as well, and I can see that shift also from Twitter to LinkedIn when people finally realize that just producing content that disappears after 2 minutes, it's not the best way of spending their time. Uh, and indeed, there are more like people contacting you on LinkedIn than there are on some other media. So that's true. Right. Okay. So now I'd like to ask you something about how you perceive yourself, because I know that you were offered the position of a CEO once, but you turned it down to launch your own business. But at the same time, you also chose a business model that doesn't require investment. It just it can be bootstrapped. So do you perceive yourself as a risk taker eventually? Yes or no?
Yes, a lot, probably. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, me too, but I was just curious because, yeah, I think like everyone who starts a company is a bit insane, right? Because eventually, like for your body, for your like organism, yourself as a like a living organism, probably being an employee is just so much safer. That this is what we like were naturally tuned to choose, right? Because then we are capable.
I think it's rather that people are, I wouldn't say told, but conditioned to do. I think it's just a mindset difference. And that's the thing. I always support anyone who would like to be independent, even if it's like freelancer or small consulting business or whatever type of business. Because I see like most people are not really happy with their day jobs. Like they don't like it. They treat it poorly. They don't have time for anything else. So I think more and more people would like to shift towards having their own business. Of course, it's comfortable for a lot of people because it's literally not your responsibility. You're going to get your salary, even though the projects aren't going so well. So of course there is benefits, but I think that in our generation there's definitely a need, or like there's more and more people who would like to launch their own businesses, maybe because they don't really know what it takes, like again, what it takes to become a CEO. It sounds good, but it's a thing that people think oh, it's great, that's the end goal, and when you're CEO successful and you're happy and everything is great, but it's not the case at all. I think that we just put too much emphasis on these titles and roles, and yeah, like until you try you don't know whether you like that or not.
Right. Well, I mean, my personal belief is that people are different and they just have different ways of producing value for others, and some people have natural preference to be independent, and some people want to feel the safety that their working environment is arranged for them and that they are catered, and they just feel like happier when they are employees. So people are just born this way. It's kind of an orientation toward the job, the same as you can talk about orientation towards other gender, like it's something you're born with. And I can genuinely say that I know people who must be free because they were born this way, and they will never be happy before they finally succeed to be in being independent. And I can genuinely say that I know people who are 100% happy as employees, and they would never ever choose to be independent and they are perfectly happy where they are. So there is a spectrum, and it's actually good that there's a spectrum, because it couldn't, it's like the society couldn't also work if everyone had a company, you know, it would be as
Obviously, yeah.
yeah. So I think it's perfectly fine that people have these different orientations, and
Yeah.
I think we are just on this far end of people who really should be free, but and even if it takes like a high price to pay, then but it's just a spectrum. So that's my point of view. Okay, and now let's maybe and one thing I would also like to mention, I like the fact that you took this gap a year or half a year. And I think that's also something that I often see in people who are very good navigators, that at some point in their lives they took time for just for themselves, for self-exploration. And in your case, it was early in your career, the beginnings of your studies, but I can see that commonality, that at some point in time, whether it was in their 20s, 30s, or even later, most people who are now in a good place, they took at least a half a year or a year off to think about themselves, travel, or just do projects that they enjoy without putting any pressure on themselves. So I can see maybe this is one of the, you know, this maybe this is one of the ingredients for the recipe for success eventually, that maybe everyone should do it at some point in their life. I don't know what you see your opinion.
I totally agree. Actually, that wasn't my only sabbatical that I took.
Mhm.
So even when I launched my business, and for a while I had projects, but it was not like super intense.
Mhm.
So yeah, basically I had a lot of time to contemplate on myself. Let's say it's not like, I wouldn't say that it's that you actively and very consciously work on things. It's rather give yourself the time to process, or like even put small things together in your life. Because obviously when I was working in the industry, I was like tired and overworked all the time. I didn't have time for anything basically. I went to bed around 1 o'clock. I woke up at 6 or went to bed even later. I was just exhausted. And you cannot maintain that for such a long time. And after that, I I didn't really feel guilty to, like, that's another thing where I became much more mature, that I don't feel guilty to take time off, and I still do it. So sometimes, obviously, like if you have your own business, especially when you are a consultant, it's like it's very variable. So sometimes you have deadlines and you have like literally work day and night, weekend, all the time. But then you should give yourself the permission that, okay, then I take the next week off or next weeks off even. And it's good because you can do that, but then you have to do it too. You're your own boss, and you have to give yourself the permission that, okay, now I rest, now I don't work. And that's tricky when you have your own business. There is always room to work. You can always work on something, obviously. So, you have to be a good boss of yourself, in a sense that you have to motivate and push yourself, but you also have to be the good boss in that sense that you have to say that, okay, now you stop, because you take care of yourself. But I think that, yeah, these breaks are super super important, because our brain is not really wired to take in so much information that we are basically bombarded every day. Workplace, social media, we, like, that's not our natural state. We always consume something. And I already learned when I had those positions that basically I got my good ideas, some technological solutions, when I was like taking a shower or something like that. You have to switch your brain off. And it's not like that nothing really happens actively, but then somehow things just set. You just process things and everything clears up. And even when I have a consulting project and I just do it, do it, do it, and then I feel stuck, and okay, let's go for a walk, and I go back, and it seems so easy, and I finish with something in 5 minutes. So you need these breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you have to also find your like an activity that re-energizes you. As you said, maybe for you it's walking. For me, actually, I used to go to spa, but like recently it's closed for obvious reasons, but I hope it will be reopened soon. So that was my like safety button. Every time I felt, okay, this is too much for me, I'm exhausted, I was just, you know, taking my bath clothes and the towel and going to the spa for like 5-6 hours. And yeah, so I think and interestingly, that's also where one of my projects has started, because I was talking to people in the restaurant of the spa where everyone was sitting in their bath clothes, you know. So normally when you speak to people at the business meetup, everyone is dressed, you know, they come dressed.
Yeah.
And you can tell from, you know, you make judgments on people on the you know, based on how they look, and you can tell what they do for a living sometimes from the way they are dressed and they behave. But when people are sitting in a restaurant, in a spa, everyone dressed in exactly the same, you know, dark blue like bath gown, then how, you know, when you start speaking to them, you have no idea who they are. And at some point I realized that while just chatting with these people, I can guess quite well where they work, just based on how they speak about life, you know. And for instance, if you ask someone, why shouldn't you steal from other people, if they answer that it's a sin, or it's evil, it's a bad thing to do, or that it's illegal, then usually that means they work in a public institution or a big company. And if they say that it's about karma, they are usually entrepreneurs, you know. So that you can guess, you know. And
Yeah.
it was such an interesting discovery that I started thinking about how to hack it. So how to come up with a test that can you know, indicate where you fit best in the job market, given how you think about life and about work. And that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm quite close to the to publication of this test now. So that was also funny, because like I was going to spa to recharge, but in the end I came up with the idea for like my best project there. But yeah, I think it's really important to have such a like a safety button and something that you like doing in free time. If you feel like you really need a while for yourself. And I totally agree, it's so hard. It's so hard because every time, yeah, it's so hard to do it without a sense of guilt if you have your own company. I totally get it. But you know, it's also sometimes it's maybe good to also choose an activity that is like not only recharging you but also good for your health. Like spa is also good for your cardiovascular system, so it's a bit like exercising as well. So I can tell to myself that it's also, you know, good for the business because I will be fitter. So it's actually well spent time and investment in the business as well, not just time off. I don't know how about you, but I think it's good to
No, it is always a bad, I mean, like it's always a good idea to invest in yourself, I think. And I think sports, for instance, are super important. So that's something that really, honestly, like when I was so overwhelmed, that kept me sane. I didn't care. I would start my workouts at 10
Mhm.
p.m. or 11 p.m. because I needed that. It helps so much. Actually, it really helps you to clear your thoughts and you function better. I know or anyone, when I overload myself, I just don't perform so well anyway. So it's better to have a clear mind and a healthy body. I think that always helps with basically everything. And it also gives you confidence. So I think that hobbies are important, social relationships are very important, but your time for yourself is something, or whatever you like to do for yourself, if it's skincare or running or baking, whatever gives you like a sense of accomplishment, basically, that would help your business because that really changes your entire attitude. And I think it's especially when you have your own business, when you're like really tense and you really want something to happen, your vibe is different.
Mhm.
You can come off as desperate and that backfires, versus if you're like very confident and calm and you have several things going on, somehow people just gravitate towards you. I don't know, it's a bit difficult to put, but this is what
Yeah.
I feel in general.
Yeah.
And if we refer back to what we talked about at the beginning of this interview, that when you have those downs, when your business is not going too well, then of course it's easy to feel that you're a failure. But if you have a lot of other things in your life, you can take it more easy and it helps you to carry on. So whatever hobby you have, or whatever relationships, or you do charity, or volunteering, or for instance, my hobby always has been acrobatics or aerial gymnastics and this kind of things. And that's another layer of my life, and I even used it during my PhD. When I was really tired and my supervisor was really pushing me over every limit, and I had to go home, and I knew that I have to wake up at 5 in the morning, but I still have to finish with these slides because she didn't like them. And instead I was like, yeah, I just go to the studio and I'm going to hang upside down from something for a while, and it helps a lot. So I think it's so important to do whatever give you a confidence, because you're not your business. It's just a portion of your life. And of course, it's really easy to identify yourself with your position at the company or with your business. But I think it's really, really important that you have other things going on. You focus on them and you gain like a lot of energy and confidence from those other activities. And as you put, you cannot know. You meet someone in the spa, or you meet someone at the gym. So you can meet people accidentally in basically every situation.
Right. Indeed, and I think it's again all about the karmic energy that is very important in business, and I totally agree with you that um, we often like attract opportunities when we are like in this like good spirit and
Yep.
with a good vibe. If you go to a business meetup with like in a good mood, um, feeling energetic, there is such a like the chances are you will meet with new opportunities. And whereas if you come there like exhausted, like it almost never happens that
Exactly.
you
Yep.
get,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I totally get it. And well, that's also, I mean, that's also in some ways a problem, because like in a startup culture there is this culture of like success, that you have to also appear to be so. So even if
Yeah.
you're at your like deepest low, you still have to appear energetic and successful and happy. And there's like a double pressure, because in academia, at least now, there's an acceptance for being uh, like imperfect and having mental health problems, and people openly say it. And it's totally fine to say it in public, that you're going through a dark period. But in business, it's not accepted. Like no one, like you will not get customers or business partners if you're like a depressed person. So
I think that I understand what you're talking about, and definitely there's a toxic culture, especially when it comes to this startup, especially when it comes to young entrepreneurs in
yeah,
certain areas. I totally know what you mean. That type of attitude, which is like, yeah, I don't like it. Let's say I've been to some of those meetings, and everyone was super successful, and the CEO of their 1% company, and yes, this kind of things. However, I think that's for more mature people, with fellow business owners. So I work with more like, I generally work with people who are older than me, like in their
yeah,
40s or even like 50s. I think that they already have a different attitude. So actually, and what I learned was that being human, like humble and honest, helps you a lot, because
right,
that type of, sorry, but this cocky attitude can kind of impress someone for a few
yeah,
seconds, but it's really superficial, and it's going to wear off very fast. And that's not gonna, maybe you can impress someone very quickly, but it's not gonna retain your clients. They look for someone who is more genuine, who is like an honest person, who can show so-called vulnerability. Obviously, I'm not going to cry on a conference call, but if I say that, sorry, this day is hard, please talk tomorrow, or say that, I'm not almighty, I cannot answer all your questions honestly, or admit that this is the line when it's not my expertise anymore.
Right.
I would suggest that I refer you to another expert who I trust. And people generally value this kind of gestures. So I think that, yeah, again, if you go with the flow, you look at social media, you go to these gatherings, you would get the impression that you have to have this, oh, I'm successful from the very beginning aura. But I think that for anyone who is in business for a longer time, you cannot deceive those people, and they will rather value the more honest and open approach.
Right. Actually, I fully agree with you that when you working with people older than you, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. And there was some research in this area that actually showed clearly that the success rate of companies set by um, older founders is in general higher than by 20 and
Oh,
30-year-olds.
yeah.
And there is almost a linear relation between the two. So, and the average age of a founder of a successful venture backed company is 45. So indeed, with age there is more wisdom and experience. And I myself, if I can talk about a little bit about how I see this, when I work with subcontractors, with people who do front end, like back end of the test or graphic design, I choose for young and energetic people, because I know that they are like young, creative, and they have a lot of energy. They can do a lot of tasks in a short time,
Mhm.
and they are very enthusiastic. So if they like the project, they could work until like 3 a.m. And that's what happens. So they are super efficient at that, and very like in general enthusiastic and happy about doing it. So if there is like but I have to set the goals. I kind of work out the project, and like I give them a bit of work, and then they are super good at it. But when I need like business advice, or I think about the strategy for a company, I always go to people who are older than me. And that I totally agree with you that there is a value in experience and life experience. So yeah, I can see the difference between the two. So if you want to have a lot of work done, that is very well defined work, like you have everything on your mind, how it should look and how it should be done step by step, then it's sometimes good to take someone who is just young and has like plenty of energy. But when it comes to making difficult decisions, then yeah, I would always go to someone who is like 10 or 20 years older than me. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think their decisions over much better. So I know I'm generally an impatient person when it comes to myself or my decisions or my progress. And I already learned a lot and developed a lot, but I probably am still nowhere in this. And it's nice to see sometimes that when I work with someone who's just somewhat older than me,
Mhm.
how like they're more careful when it comes to like jumping to conclusions. They
Yeah.
think about their decisions, they get back to you or regarding one topic. And yeah, so I definitely see a gap between this new emerging generation of successful entrepreneurs and the older ones.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's really like, I think that actually our generation is somewhere in between. So we are just this undefined grayish zone probably, but like even I perceive young people sometimes like I was really old. For instance, I heard some university students talking about they were doing some management education. They were in their first year probably. And all that confidence they had, they like, oh,
Yeah.
this university is not enough for me, this country is not good enough for me, I should be here and there, and in 2 years I'm going to be this and that. I was like, wow. Yeah, I think that we did not have that much confidence when we were attending university, so there is like a big shift, uh,
Well,
definitely.
I think that's where they want to be, because they see all this success on the media, anyone could be an influencer today. So they
Yeah.
can see people
Yes.
who don't produce any particular value. They just talk about themselves and how they are and how they live their lifestyle, and they get plenty of followers and money from it. So it just creates an impression that anyone can do it. Right. Thank you so much, Enika, for visiting us today. I'm very glad to meet you, and thank you for sharing your insights with us. And for anyone who would like to contact Enika, you have all the important links below. Please find the links to her company website, and also please contact her through LinkedIn. And thank you so much for watching. We would like to welcome all your comments and questions, and of course subscribe to this channel if you like this type of content. And thank you so much, and have a nice day.